suddenly feels utterly pointless. The job that once seemed important now feels like a meaningless charade. The relationships that once brought joy now feel like empty performances. The goals you were chasing now seem arbitrary and hollow. And you look at your life and think, what's the point of any of this? Why am I doing what I'm doing? What does any of it matter? This is not depression, necessarily, though it might look like it from the outside. This is something much more interesting. This is what happens when you wake up from the collective dream, when you start to see through the game that everyone is playing, when the meaning that you borrowed from society begins to dissolve, and you're left facing the raw question, what is the point? Now, most people respond to this feeling in one of two ways, and both are problematic. The first response is panic. They feel the pointlessness and immediately try to run from it, to distract themselves, to create new meanings, new goals, new purposes. They throw themselves into work, into relationships, into causes, into addictions, anything to avoid sitting with that uncomfortable feeling that nothing matters. The second response is resignation. They accept the pointlessness as a final truth and sink into a kind of nihilistic despair. If nothing matters, why do anything? Why get out of bed? Why engage with life at all? They become paralyzed by the very insight that could have freed them. But I want to suggest a third response, a response that's actually quite revolutionary. What if the feeling that everything is pointless is not a problem to be solved, but a doorway to be walked through? What if it's not the end of meaning, but the beginning of a much deeper kind of meaning? Let me explain what I mean. When you feel that everything is pointless, what you're really recognizing is that all the meanings you've been living by are invented. They're made up. They're stories that human beings have told themselves to make sense of existence. And there's nothing wrong with stories, but when you realize that they're just stories, that there's no cosmic necessity to any of them, something very important has happened. You've seen through the game. You've recognized that meaning is not found, it's created. And once you see this, you can never go back to the innocent belief that your job or your relationship or your cause has some inherent, absolute meaning. The spell is broken. And this feels pointless at first because you've lost the meanings you were borrowing from outside yourself. Society told you that success matters, that family matters, that progress matters, that leaving a legacy matters. And you believed it. You made these borrowed meanings your own and built your life around them. But now you've seen that these are just agreements, just collective stories that we've decided to take seriously. And once you see the arbitrary nature of these meanings, they lose their power over you. And yes, this creates a void, a sense of pointlessness. But this void is not the end, it's the beginning. You see, as long as you're living according to borrowed meanings, you're not really free. You're like an actor who's so identified with their role that they've forgotten their acting. You take the script seriously because you think it's real, because you think it matters in some absolute sense. But when you realize it's just a script, just a story, you're suddenly free to play the role differently, or to choose a different role entirely, or to write your own script. The feeling of pointlessness is the recognition of your freedom. It's the moment when you realize that you don't have to live according to anyone else's definitions of what matters. You're free to decide for yourself what's meaningful, what's worth doing, how you want to spend your brief time in this strange existence. But here's where most people make a mistake. They think that because nothing has inherent meaning, they now need to create meaning, to impose meaning on a meaningless universe. And so they go searching for their purpose, their passion, their mission. They think they need to figure out what their life is supposed to be about and then dedicate themselves to it. But this is just another trap. This is taking the feeling of pointlessness and trying to cover it up with a new story, a new meaning, a self-created purpose. And while this might work for a while, it's ultimately just another game, just another way of avoiding the deeper truth. The deeper truth is this: life doesn't need a point. Existence doesn't require justification. You don't need a reason to be here or a purpose to fulfill. The question, what's the point, is itself based on a misunderstanding, on the assumption that there should be a point, that meaning is something life owes you. But what if life is not a journey towards some goal, not a problem to be solved, not a story that needs a satisfying conclusion? What if life is more like music or dance? You don't listen to a symphony in order to reach the end. You don't dance in order to arrive somewhere. The point of music is the music itself. The point of dancing is the dancing itself. It's not going somewhere. It's already here, fully present in each moment. In the same way, the point of life is simply living, simply being, simply the experience of existence itself. Not for anything, not toward anything, but as an end in itself. This very moment, exactly as it is the point. This breath, this sensation, this thought, this feeling, this is it. There's nothing else you need to get to, nothing else you need to achieve, no higher meaning you need to discover. When you really understand this, when you truly see that life doesn't need justification, something remarkable happens. The feeling of pointlessness transforms into something else entirely. It becomes a kind of lightness, a freedom, a playfulness. If there's no ultimate point, if there's no cosmic significance to anything you do, then you're free to simply enjoy the process of living without the burden of having to make it mean something. You can work at your job without needing it to be your calling. You can love someone without needing them to complete you. You can pursue goals without needing to achieve them. You can create things without needing them to be important. You can play the game of life with full intensity while knowing it's just a game. This is what I mean when I say the feeling of pointlessness is a doorway. It's the doorway out of seriousness, out of the heavy burden of trying to make your life matter, out of the exhausting project of creating meaning. On the other side of that doorway is a kind of freedom that most people never experience. The freedom to live without needing life to be anything other than what it is. Now, this doesn't mean you become passive or apathetic. Quite the opposite. When you're no longer burdened by the need to make everything meaningful, you're actually more free to engage fully with life. You can throw yourself into activities with complete abandon, not because they matter in some ultimate sense, but simply because they're what's happening, because they're the form that life is taking in this moment. Think about a child playing. The child isn't worried about the meaning of the game. The child isn't asking, what's the point of playing? The child is simply absorbed in the playing itself, fully present, fully engaged. And then the game ends, and the child moves on to something else without any sense that the game needed to have a lasting purpose or significance. This is how you can live when you've walked through the doorway of pointlessness. You can engage with life fully and passionately, and then let it go and move on to the next moment, the next game, the next experience. Nothing needs to be permanent. Nothing needs to be ultimately meaningful. Everything can be enjoyed for what it is, in the moment that it's happening. But what about the big questions? What about death? What about suffering? What about the fact that everything you do will eventually be forgotten? That the universe will end? That nothing you create will last forever? Doesn't this make everything pointless? Only if you think the point of life is to leave a permanent mark, to create something that lasts, to be remembered. But why should that be the point? The sunset is beautiful, and then it's gone. The flower blooms, and then it wilts. The wave rises, and then it falls back into the ocean. Nothing about the temporary nature of these things makes them less valuable, less beautiful, less worth experiencing. In fact, it's precisely because things are temporary that they're precious. If the sunset lasted forever, would you still stop to watch it? If flowers never wilted, would you treasure them? The poignancy of life, its bittersweet beauty, comes from the fact that it's fleeting, that each moment happens only once, that everything is always already passing away, even as it's arriving. So when everything feels pointless, when you look at your life and can't find the meaning you once thought was there, this is not a crisis. This is an opportunity. It's the opportunity to stop living for some imaginary future point, some goal or achievement or legacy, and to start living for the sheer fact of being alive, for the immediate experience of existence. What do you do when everything feels pointless? You stop asking what the point is. You stop trying to justify your existence or prove your worth or make your life matter. You simply live. You breathe, you eat, you walk, you talk, you work, you play, you love, you create, not because any of it means something in the grand scheme of things, but because this is what life is. This is what's happening. This is the dance you're dancing. And in this surrender, in this letting go of the need for meaning, you might discover something surprising. You might discover that life becomes more vivid, more immediate, more alive when you stop trying to make it mean something. Colors are brighter when you're not worried about their significance. Food tastes better when you're not concerned with its purpose. Relationships are more intimate when you're not using them to fill some void. The pointlessness, when you really embrace it, becomes a kind of freedom. It's the freedom to be completely here, completely present, completely engaged with what is, without the overlay of meaning, without the weight of significance, without the burden of purpose. Let me tell you a Zen story that illustrates this. A student comes to the master and says, "Master, I've studied all the scriptures, I've practiced all the techniques, I've contemplated all the koans, but still, I don't understand. What is the meaning of life?" And the master says, "Have you eaten your breakfast?" The student says, "Yes." The master says, "Then go wash your bowl." Do you see? The student is looking for some grand cosmic meaning, some ultimate purpose. But the master is pointing to the simple fact of living. Eat your breakfast, wash your bowl. This moment, this activity, this simple fact of existence, this is it. There's nothing else you need to find, nothing else you need to understand. When everything feels pointless, this is what you do. You eat your breakfast, you wash your bowl, you do what's in front of you to do, not because it has some grand meaning, but because this is the form that life is taking right now. You're here, you're alive, and this is what being alive looks like in this moment. And gradually, if you stay with this, if you don't run back to searching for meaning or sink into despair, you begin to notice something. You begin to notice that the question itself dissolves. What's the point? Stops being a relevant question. It's like asking what the point of a sunset is, or what the purpose of a mountain is, or what a river means. These questions don't make sense because these things don't exist for any reason beyond themselves. They're not means to an end. They're ends in themselves. And so are you. You're not here to accomplish something, or to fulfill some purpose, or to make your life mean something. You're here because you're here. You're alive because you're alive. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. So when everything feels pointless, celebrate. You've seen through the game. You've recognized that all the meanings you were chasing were just stories. And now you're free. Free to live without the burden of having to make it all matter. Free to enjoy the sunset without needing it to teach you a lesson. Free to love without needing it to complete you. Free to work without needing it to define you. Free to simply be alive for no reason at all. This is the great liberation that comes from walking through the doorway of pointlessness. On the other side, you discover that life was never about the point. It was always about the living. And the living, the sheer fact of existence,